Welcome to Season 2 of the Extraordinary Acts for Others podcast, brought to you by the Friends of Freedom's Ring. Each episode serves to celebrate extraordinary goodness being done by people, businesses, and organizations right here in our extraordinary country. Let's let these stories excite our spirit and motivate us to do our own extraordinary acts for others in our own communities. That way, we can do our part in making our neighborhoods, towns, and cities in our country even more extraordinary. Let's go do the extra. Thank you for coming back and joining us on the Extraordinary Acts for Others podcast. I'm Sarah Hunold, and again, I want to thank you for waiting out our long break that we had. It was unexpectedly long. We moved to Virginia, and now we're expecting to move to Japan. And so, again, we're going to take another break after we spit out about 3 episodes coming up here. And then we're going to probably reform a bit and then hopefully bring to you a whole new podcast. But today we are really excited because our guest is Jessica Manfrey. She's the 2019 Armed Forces Insurance Coast Guard Spouse of the Year. And she is teaming up with the Army Spouse of the Year and National Guard Spouse of the Year for Giving Tuesday Military. Giving Tuesday is the philanthropic day Tuesday after Thanksgiving. And the Giving Tuesday military movement is all about trying to get military members, their families, veteran families, and patriotic Americans who support the military to go out and to do 1 million acts of kindness. So again, just like the spirit of extraordinary acts for others, they're really looking for those acts of kindness that are so simple that we could do in our neighborhoods, do in our schools, do in our communities, that ordinary service with that extra spirit. We'll also talk to her about how she helped Coast Guard families during the shutdown last year and really did some amazing, extraordinary acts for others there. And then how she had used volunteer work and really has now created a career in a service-oriented career. So lots to talk to Jessica about, and it was a very good conversation, so we're excited to have that out for you. So here we go. Let's get to it. So Jessica, why don't you tell us how the idea for Giving Tuesday Military started?
Kind of funny how it happened. So, I am the Armed Forces Insurance Coast Guard Spouse of the Year. And earlier this summer, I partnered with our Army Spouse of the Year, Maria Reed. She has a show called Moving with the Military. It's a production company, but essentially she goes all over the country remodeling homes for military families. There's a lot of fundraising involved. People can submit families for this. And so when we met in DC in May for our awards, she said, I've never featured a Coast Guard family. I would love to work with you to make this happen for a Coast Guard family. And so I was like, yes, let's do this yesterday, and it's not that easy. It takes a lot to raise money and raise that kind of money. We were very fortunate in that, I don't want to say I have connections, but because I'm from the Coast Guard, I knew my people. I knew who I can go to. And that typically is our chiefs. There are chiefs associations all over the country, like every district area has one. And I knew once I had a family and I had their story and I shared it, that they would help, and they did. And so we did this renovation. It was incredible. We ended up doing the biggest one she's ever done. And I'm going to brag a little bit on the Coast Guard. Typically people will say they're going to volunteer, and then she shows up and there might be 2 or 3 people. And she's been known to fall asleep and paint because she's literally, she's not only filming, and she has another person that comes along to do that, but she's doing the renovation. So she will literally, exhaust herself and not sleep to get these things finished. Well, with the Coast Guard, and the Chiefs Mess, and I would say probably 95% of the people that volunteered did not know the gentleman we were helping, but they showed up. We had 35 people every single day. We had businesses from, throughout the community where we were at donating electrician services, donating light fixtures. We raised a lot of money, but that money really was doubled when you consider what the community brought forth. So it was just really incredible. And I was so proud that I reached out to Giving Tuesday, and I just shared our episode, and I said, this community is amazing. I love this. And I just thought this would be something that you guys would want to see. well, I didn't expect a response. I mean, they've got like 300,000 followers on their Facebook. I was like, whatever. But Kathleen Murphy ended up responding, and she's their communications director. And she's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Have you ever thought about doing something for Giving Tuesday? And I was like, well, I love it. Like, I love the concept. And so we put a meeting on the books for myself, Maria, and Sam to talk to her. So we had a phone conference, and basically our thought was Giving Tuesday's original principle and intention was kindness. And it's kind of morphed into more of a fundraising, which is amazing. I work for a nonprofit. I know the importance of, fundraising, but we wanted to bring it back to engaging your community, your neighborhood, and doing kind things for others. And so we basically pitched our idea because of our titles. We felt like we could reach our family, and that's the military community, that we could engage them and, get them fired up to do this. And so we pitched our idea. They loved it. And then the next thing you know, I'm signing a contract and buying a website. And, that's kind of how it went about. And it was very simple. It's funny, as people join, they ask a lot of questions. They almost want a blueprint of how to go forward. And it's like, look, avoid money if you can. Obviously, some things that you're going to do are going to cost money, but really what we're trying to avoid is that simple, and we're all guilty of it, holding our phones and just clicking donate and being like, oh, did a kind act, go out, like find out what the needs are in your community. How can you make a difference? Or, do simple things. Sam went out one day and taped quarters to a gumball machine with a note for some kid to find. And that is going to make their day. It really could be a realm of anything. So our role is simply to be there to encourage, to be a part of the chapters where we're located, because we're all spread out. And it just continually grows, and it's really exciting to see. And I love the conversations that we're having with Aisha, who's the CEO, and Kathleen, because this was their intent. This is why they started it. So to see us coming back and bringing it back to its roots, and now there's another group, Giving Tuesday Kids, that we're kind of partnering with to help, because we're working with a lot of our schools, our DoD schools. It's just kind of magical to watch it all unfold,
Well, and that's phenomenal, because that was the whole intent of our organization as well, was seeing that we, as knowing that this is a good leadership role for military spouses, that volunteer work is secondhand. That's how they breathe, is
for sure,
by serving others. And it's amazing to see that gap between that being natural for military families and being something that doesn't necessarily come natural outside. And so to have this big umbrella where if you can see 1 million acts of kindness in one day and say, look, this is pure leadership because this is what we do day in and day out, and to celebrate the giving and the kindness that comes out of that is really important. I think the more that I think people focus so much on changing the world and not realizing the personal interactions of kindness and giving. So I love that the focus is on kindness and bringing that back to what is one simple thing that you can do that day for someone else, build that community. One of the things that we were looking at as seeing how Giving Tuesday had worked is, it started in 2012, so not even 10 years old. And I think I saw where like the first year it raised $10 million, and last year it raised like $380 million.
Yep.
And so if we look at that trajectory, is there belief in you guys thinking that we could see same kind of growth and escalation in Giving Tuesday military? Like
the acts, you think?
Yeah, that like this year, I hope that skyrocket as it catches on.
I hope, because some of the questions that we've had have been directly from nonprofits who want to participate, but because our mission is literally not money driven, they're kind of like, what do we do? And it's like, look, nobody wants you to stop fundraising. All we ask is that if you or your company chooses to go out and do a kind act, whatever that looks like for that day, and you use our hashtag and you share, don't include a donate button. That's really like the only caveat. We want people to see you doing. Now, if somebody sees XYZ company doing this amazing thing for the community, of course they're going to click on it and be like, I'm going to give to that. And that's a side effect of being kind, but it's not the original intent. And so that's something that's been hard for a lot of nonprofits to get, because they're like, well, we want to showcase this, but what about? And it's like, do both. Do both. You know, you can do Giving Tuesday, do all your fundraising. And then if you really believe in our mission, come up with an act. You know, what we're doing here in St. Louis may not work in Okinawa, Japan, where there's another chapter, you know, and I've had that too. Why don't you just pick one act? And it's like, no, that's not what it's about. You make it your own. You know your communities, you know where your passion lies and what you want to do to make a difference. You know, we've tried to make it easy by making connections. We've partnered with the American Red Cross. They're going to have every single bus and brick and mortar location open for people to give blood. That's such a simple act of kindness. So put that on your calendar. I'm going to go give blood, because you are saving a life. You know, that is an amazing thing that you can do. And so that's kind of been a little bit of a struggle, but I think slowly but surely they're starting to get it. I think it's easier when we have conversations like this and we can explain, because when people go to the website, they're like, I just don't, you know, and you know, we thought we made it simple, but it's still like, really, there is no catch. Just be kind.
Well, and I think that's always interesting, because that's the same conversation that we have a lot of times, is because we like to focus on volunteer work. And so to say, how can we get volunteers and increase volunteerism, but and then also make it more meaningful and purposeful for you. But a lot of people are saying like, well, what event can you host that like we can come volunteer at? And say, no, what we want to do is celebrate what you're already doing, or help you make that resume building, or to make that more meaningful to you. And then we will host some events, but it's really kind of funny to say the world is the option, that there isn't, hey, go and everybody put a quarter on the gumball machine. It's, what do you think? What is there? A children's hospital right next to you? Is there a police station? Is there whatever, the teachers at your schools? But and I think that does in the long run allow it to be more meaningful, right? It's your cause, your purpose.
The kids get it quick.
The
kids, they get it. You know, it wasn't anything explaining it to my son. He was just like, oh, cool. And I was like, what do you want to do? And he's like, I want to have a hot cocoa stand at my school on that morning and give kids hot cocoa for free. And I was like, cool, we're going to do that. And let me tell you, you know, we have a little bit bigger projects going on here just because of the work that I do with Children's Home and Aid. And, you know, we have a large homeless population. So we are partnering with the American Legions and VFWs, and even like our mayor here. I have 5 locations that have opened up as a donation site for different items so we can build blessing bags. And the kids in our district, so there's 3,500, are all going to be making cards of affirmation for these bags for those that are getting the bags. And so they're like so fired up and excited to do this. The kids get it a lot faster than the adults do. And I would say probably 70% of the people who are signing up for this movement want to just join a team. They want somebody else to lead it and kind of tell them, which is cool. But I feel like people don't realize their own potential and that they can lead something. You know, they can look around in their own backyard and figure out, you know, where there's a need, you know, your local humane society, you know, go to your church. If you're a military spouse, you know, reach out to chaplains, find out if there's families on base that you can impact. Like, there's just so much opportunity, but it's like you said, a lot of people almost want it set up for them. And I don't know if that's like a fear of failure, or, you know, not wanting to lead something on their own, or I really don't know.
Yeah, I think the sticking point gets to be, there's so many ideas. So when the world is there, you're saying, oh, I could do this, this, and this. And I think it's great to refocus on simple kindness. That you don't have to have the deepest impact, the most lasting impact. Start with kindness, and then if it's successful, then keep doing it. Like, nothing says that you have to stop on December 3rd and say one time only. Like, hey, if we really like this, figure out how to keep it going and keep going on.
That's the conversations that I've had with the Giving Tuesday team. Their intent is that one day, every Tuesday will be Giving Tuesday. And, that's our hope, is that, we've spent all these months, building this up, and then we'll have December 3rd come. We hope that on December 4th, people will be more aware and, pay attention more to the people around them. In the military specifically, we know we have very high rates of suicide. In the civilian world, those rates are going up as well. You don't know the person that you're walking alongside and how your simple smile and, things can impact their day. Samantha, she's in Buffalo, and since she started this, she's a physician's assistant. She used to, start her time with her patients by saying, how's your day going? Now she says, tell me the best part about your day. Because that changes your whole, like, if you have to sit there and think, even if you've gone through some tough stuff that day, you can find that one thing, that one magical thing. And, she did that with a patient, and he asked her the same thing. And she's like, my cup of coffee, just sitting there. That was the best part of my day, was starting. And they talked about that. Well, do you know he came back an hour later with her favorite kind of coffee? And so it's just like, she impacted his day, and then he turned around and did that. And so then she was just shining for the rest of the day. And it's just simple little things like a conversation that can spark so much.
Oh, and that's amazing when that does happen, because you get that. I think kindness really makes you focus on the relationship, right? That makes you know your neighbors, know your community, and not just, again, like you said, punch the donate button mindlessly, but to say, no, I want to know you. I want to see you and understand. Where did you pick that up from? Like growing up, or like that?
God. I've always been a fix-it person, and that can be a downfall too, right? Because we can't fix everybody. I have my undergrad in psychology, and I always knew that whatever I did, I wanted it to be serving others. That was just a passion of mine. It was something that made me happy. And I spent, the last 7 years working with adults and children diagnosed with developmental disabilities and serving them, whether it was in case management, direct service, however. And I knew that I wanted to do more, and that's when I decided to go back and get my master's in social work. And I didn't even have to think about it. I just knew that was like what I was meant for. It was going to allow me to make the most impact and do the most. I was raised by a grandmother that would give you the shirt off her back. Like, it was something that was ingrained in me. They would do anything for anybody around them. And she was also the grandmother that if you let her go into a store, she'd be, in there for an hour getting a loaf of bread, because she would make best friends with everybody in there, but she spread that. That was just her personality, and she made people happy just to be around her. And so I hope I'm just a little piece of like what she was, to the world. And so for me, like, that's where it really comes from, and doing that, because we're all busy. I know I'm busy. My plate is like, but we all have time to do this, and to be kind, and to just take that moment, you know what I mean? And so I think she's the one who really taught me that.
And so let's talk about that for a second, because you said that you work in social work and that you're working on your master's for that. Mm-hmm. You're not only talking about do an act of kindness and volunteer on your time, but also then having a career and having meaningful, purposeful job in service. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times that when I talk to people, you have certain industries where people, teachers, law enforcement, whatever, that they're like, yes, I wanted for service. But then you have a lot of times this gap where people are like, no, my work's going to be my work, and then I'm going to volunteer if I can, or that's a secondary part. And do you think you could have it both ways? Like, I guess that service has to be running through your...
It's such a part of me. When I was working on my associates, I worked for banks. I was actually in banking. I was a personal banker, and I loved it because, I was working with a lot of the older population, and I love service. I love talking, like all that makes me happy. So it was nothing to do this, right? And then I was in Florida, by the way. I'm just trying to like paint the picture. And then everything crashed. 2008. The housing market, the recession, it was just like overwhelming. And then that bank that I was working for was still pushing me to call these consumers who were already coming in to use their lines of credit to pay their mortgages for the houses that were empty that they weren't going to sell. They were pushing me to sell more, get them to take on more debt. And it just was wrong. It was like, I can't, it was one thing when, things were well, and I really didn't have, I never pushed. It would be like, here's the products, it came naturally. But to have to, as bad as, people were drowning, to still, I couldn't do it. And so, I married my husband, and we actually got transferred to Alaska. And I had the opportunity to go work for another bank, or I had an opportunity to make $10,000 less and work for a nonprofit in their child care assistance program. And I went to my husband and I was like, I cannot do this anymore. Like, I just can't. So he was like, cool, do whatever. I'm not going to tell you what to do what makes you happy. And from that moment, I have never taken a position that I was not going to be passionate about. And I have not ever gone back. Since then, I worked for that nonprofit. I was a substitute teacher while I got my bachelor's degree, working with kids. And then I dove right into serving, the population with developmental disabilities. But I've never gone back. And I don't think I ever could. It would have to be service. It would have to be helping others. Yes, it would be nice to make a little bit more money as a social worker. I'm not going to, because we're not rolling in it. But that's not the end all be all,
So when you realized that service was that important and that definitely want to look for a career in service, how did you figure out that social work and working with like substance abuse was your niche?
Oh my goodness. So my biological father was an alcoholic, still is, left us when we were very young. That's why I say I was raised by my grandparents, my mother, because that was his, he chose that. And so like, that was like the beginning of my life. And then I've also, had other family members suffer with substance use and watched it just tear apart families and communities. And so last year I spent my generalist year interning at a behavioral health clinic. And I would say about 90% of our clients were there mostly mandated because of substance use disorder. And I found a passion for it. Obviously it had already been on my mind because of my own personal experiences, but hearing their stories, hearing how most of their stories either started off because they had a very traumatic childhood or they were simply handed a prescription by a physician. It blew my mind. And I just felt like they needed people who cared and people that weren't going to just look at them like they were, horrible people. Because I think when people see drug addiction, they see the act in that thing that person's doing, but they don't listen to the story. And I think if you listen, it doesn't mean you have to agree with the choices that they made, but that empathy, I think that's going to go a long way. And it's not going to save everybody, but if it can save one person, I think it's important. I think it's important to do. And so you're focusing on not only your professional side, but then stories have come out on just, again, you applying this kindness philosophy and this idea of passing on generosity. But there is two stories that stuck out to me was your work with stockings for recruits, and then your work during the government shutdown and helping other Coast Guard families who were looking at missing paychecks and going through that time, and seeing that's another thing that you added on to you had your professional plate and then adding more onto it. Can you talk about what both those things are, and then how you do add on from professional life, your home life, and then adding on? Well, my husband loves to say, "What free thing are you doing today?" because he just knows. He may tease me, but he would never not support me. He may say, you need to dial it back just a little bit or you're going to drop dead. But I think he also loves that part of me because that's just who I've always been. Stockings for Recruits was such an amazing thing to be a part of when we were in Cape May, because I am a mom and I can only imagine how because they're kids, how these kids and their parents or families feel, being, all alone on Christmas and stuck there. And so it was just a really amazing thing to be a part of, between the fundraising. And for the last 3 years, I spent my Christmas Eve with them, giving the stockings out and talking with them and kind of sharing what it's like to be on the other side as a military spouse and have a family, because they're just starting their, journey with the military. And so it was really hard to leave and not have that, to be a part of my Christmas. And I was blessed to work with some amazing spouses in Cape May. The Spouses Club there was very, very much driven by service. Not only were we, building these stockings and fundraising, but then that fundraising that we had left over would go towards handing out scholarships to dependents and spouses. I've been the recipient of a scholarship from them, which was just phenomenal, because, it is hard, as a military family, especially when you're trying to send kids to college or you yourself are trying to go back to school. So just the mission all in itself was just wonderful. As far as the shutdown, it's kind of interesting how I fell into that. We were living in Coast Guard housing, so we were somewhat protected. We didn't have rent due. We didn't have, I knew, just watching the political climate and paying attention, I said to my husband, I said, this is going to happen. And he was like, oh no, because we had been through it before where maybe it was like a day or two, but never. And I said, I'm telling you, this is going to happen. And this was like New Year's Eve night. So beginning then, we were conserving. We were not going out. I was working part-time. So I had that income coming in, but I just knew it was going to be bad. And I was talking with an active duty spouse and I was like, I just don't know what to do. We need to do something. I can't just sit around. And that's when she connected me with one of the fire departments that had already started collecting things. So I was like, we have a pantry. I know we have a pantry on base because as part of the Spouses Club, we had sponsored it. It was small. It was just a closet. I'm like, this is what we can do. We can provide food. If people don't have to worry about dropping, $200-$300 at the grocery store, that's money in their pocket. So that's really how, it started. And I reached out to we had a community Facebook group because they knew me and they were reaching out to me. And I was like, look, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to serve this community. We're going to do a food pantry. I was taking in donations at my house for the first couple of days. And my car and house was overrun. And then I would go up to the pantry, we'd stock it. And I'm just blessed that we had an amazing command, because immediately they called a meeting and they're like, we're going to give you a space. You need space. This is going to turn into something bigger than you've ever imagined. And I'll never forget. I was like, Captain Gibbons, it's fine. It's going to be okay. This little closet is just fine. And he's like, no, we're going to give you this space. And so it ended up turning into a full-on grocery store. We had 2 commercial, massive refrigerators, 2 regular refrigerators, 2 deep freezers. We ended up needing a back storage, and we were serving all of Southern New Jersey with this, shipping stuff out. And then we were able to send money all over the country and even overseas to help them start pantries. But never in my wildest dreams did I imagine it would grow as big as it did. And I remember, Captain Gibbons saying, are you ready for this? Because you're going to be the face of this. We need this to be a consistent message. So it's going to be you. And I was like, it's fine. Little did I know I would be on the phone from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m., coordinating stocking and doing this. I made myself ill by the end of it, for sure. But I loved watching us start what we did and then watching it multiply throughout, the country, how people started taking care of each other. And, it was kind of, I would never wish another shutdown on anybody, but it really showed the power of community and giving just to give, and what an impact the military has, on communities. You know, our Wawa down the street, the first week of the shutdown, it lost $10,000. The second week, 12, the third, 13, and the last week, $15,000. And they had to lay people off. So not only were they as a company losing money, employees couldn't work and provide for their own families. Like, it was just this massive domino effect, you know. And so we were helping them too. So it was a horrible experience for a lot of reasons, but very beautiful for many others.
Well, and I think they say that about people's worst day tends to be when you find something that's maybe one of the best moments that you have, when you see that kind of painful moments. But as you look around, what is like the one thing that is most inspiring you and encouraging you to encourage others for Giving Tuesday? And
the most inspiring thing, I think, is watching people raise their hands or texting me or messaging me on Facebook saying, we just got all these schools to participate. We're up to 3,000 kids. Or, you know, watching their excitement because we had this fire, we had this excitement, but they fuel us. Like, every day, you know, when they're sharing or whatever they're doing, like, that's really what inspires me, is seeing them do that. That's what it's all about. You know what I mean? I could be having a horrible day and then they share something incredible that they're doing, or a conversation that they had, or a new relationship that was built, and it just turns it all around. And that is the power of being kind and working together. So that's what inspires me, I think, the most.
Oh, that's awesome, because it is fun. And I've looked on Facebook as I was kind of preparing for this, and to see the different communities growing, the Giving Tuesday military communities, and to see the engagement in the groups, and to see excitement building for it. So I don't know. I feel like 1 million might be smashed pretty good.
I hope, like, that would just be incredible. And it's like some of the best stories, how it's changing how people interact day to day. Like, even our soldiers, Sam's husband is Special Forces, and he's been in an undisclosed location right now, deployed. But even him, he waited weeks for a cup of Starbucks coffee, and then he walked miles to get this cup, right? And then he saw a homeless person sitting there, and he gave that cup to him. Like, it wasn't even a thought, because he's obviously talking with her and, you know, seeing her excitement and the importance of this. And he said it made his day to do that. Like, that was more important to him, even though he had been, like, dreaming of this cup of coffee. And so I love that too, because we're working really hard to get our military, you know, involved, how they're able, you know, as safe as possible. And I think that's going to make a huge impact too, you know, where they're deployed, you know, interacting with communities and stuff. Because, you know, one of the quotes that Sam had was like, it has a ripple effect. It really does. Like, you think that that's a small pebble, but really, like, that's going to spread so far and so wide. It's just, that's our hope. So you say we're going to surpass 1 million. That would be amazing. But to me, like, we talked about it, what is December 4th going to look like if we wake up and we don't hit 1 million? Because we've had that hard conversation, and it's like, we looked at each other and we're like, who cares? Look at all this. Look at this amazingness. And I don't even know who came up with that 1 million number. I feel like I want to blame Sam. But the reality is, you know, this is amazing, even if it never went any further than this.
Well, and I just got to imagine that whether that million gets hit or not, that one, it's a positive movement in the right direction. But again, just looking at how Giving Tuesday got 10 million that first year, and then 380 million last year, to be like, the idea is there, the momentum's there. And I think definitely thinking that it's beyond generosity in donations, but generosity in times and acts of service that can really open up that door for so many more people. And that, again, as nonprofits, it doesn't always have to be about receiving too. It could be, yes, ask for the money or make that part of your fundraising efforts, but also how are you showing that you're giving in doing your own acts of service. And so that's an awesome way too for that to exchange and to open up Giving Tuesday to giving more than money, but kind of doing all the above. So do you have anything that we may have not covered or that you'd like to add about?
I mean, going back, like, and I know I speak for Sam and Maria when I say this, you know, I personally, when I was nominated for the award, I ignored it for a very long time. Because I didn't, first of all, I didn't even know about the program, but I was just like, I didn't do this for that. And one of my good friends, about 3 days before you had to like either accept it or it was going to go away, she's like, you can do a lot with this. Like, if you accept this and this happens, it will allow you to do more. And so like, that's why I did it. But it's interesting. I've had that conversation with people where they're like, why are you doing so much? Why are you? I almost feel like this sense of responsibility. Like, we were given these titles, and I feel like we've been given, you know, a seat at a table that we never thought we'd be sitting at, you know, with the connections we've made. And I think we have personal responsibilities to utilize that to do good. And so for me, like, when I think about, you know, the program, the Military Spouse of the Year program, and like what it's done, because if we had never met, this would have never happened. So it's just all these little pieces of the puzzle. And it's just, when I think about it, I'm like, wow, you know, I never dreamed I would make it all the way as the Coast Guard Spouse of the Year. But having Sam and Maria, like, at this point, they're like my sisters. Like, we talk all day long. We're FaceTiming constantly. One's in Buffalo, one's in Texas, and I'm in the middle of the country. Like, we're literally, you know, but I couldn't imagine not having them in my life. Like, they, you know, fuel me, we fuel each other. And so that's just the other thing too. Like, you never know who your partners are going to be. And, you know, family isn't always blood. And it's nice to find kindred spirits and like have that. And, you know, like, being a military family, it's hard as often as we move, you know, building friendships and losing friends. So it's awesome to have them. And we're not, like I said, anywhere near each other.
The last part is as a military family, how much do you think being a military family affects your sense of service?
Oh, I mean, I've always wanted to help people, but I think because my husband serves the country and I'm just so proud of what he does. And I know that like leaders are realizing this, is that spouses also serve. They just do it another way. And you kind of touched on that when you talked about volunteerism. We do, you know, serve our communities. And I think part of, maybe you're right. Maybe that is part of why I do what I do, because I watch him, you know, and we kind of like feed off each other and support each other in that. But yeah, that is a common theme. Military spouses tend to really, really, you know, dive in and serve their communities. And I think maybe that's why we're drawn to the people that we marry, you know, like-minded, that kind of thing. Never really thought about that. Oh.
Good question of the day for everybody. So
yeah, I like it. Well,
thank you so much for talking to us and sharing your story in the Coast Guard families and with Giving Tuesday military. Real quick, December 3rd, right? That's Giving Tuesday in general. And
it.
Military family.
Everything we've been planning, it is it. You know, that is like where you go all out, whatever that looks like to you. That is when you go out and you do it. The big thing for us, you know, we have a spreadsheet, and like for our bigger, like the schools, like counting up people, we are trying to track, like, you know, the acts. But really what's going to set us over the edge and make it the easiest way to count is for people to use that hashtag every single time that they are doing an act of kindness. And I know it feels really weird. Giving Tuesday calls it the unselfie. And that doesn't mean you're taking a picture of a homeless person as you hand them something. It can be a quick video of like, hey, I'm about to walk into here and gift them with this. Or it could be a picture of whatever it is that you are, you know, doing. But using that hashtag, it's obviously really hard to track on Facebook, but Twitter and Instagram, we made a handle for everything, just, you know, for whatever people, you know, want to utilize. But that's going to be the easiest way for us to count it up. So definitely use that hashtag every single time. And I mean, all day long. for us to reach that 1 million.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I know a lot of people feel reserved on wanting to share their acts of kindness and the service that they do. And one of the things that we've tried to promote and push out is the research says do the contrary, that you don't have to self-promote really, but that people react to what they see. And so if social media, if you sit there and say, I'm on Twitter and this is the most depressing place ever, and all it is people bickering at each other. Well, if you change that narrative by saying, hey, this is the act of kindness, that's what happens. And it's amazing to hear Giving Tuesday's story, because they really talk about using social media for the reason for their growth of being saying, hey, we're going to make this a movement. We're going to really do this. But really, if you are doing your service, put it out there and let people see it, because somebody will see it and be inspired by it to want to go do their own. And at least somebody will see it and smile and think that this is a much better world that we live in than what it is. So
Absolutely.
definitely, yes, use the hashtag Giving Tuesday Military. And
yes, you're going to inspire people. I mean, those are my favorite videos to see. We've all seen them. The gentleman that mowed the lawn for the bus stop for the kids. He was on Ellen the next week. His story was so powerful. It got that many views. The kids that were initially kind of bullying that one kid, but then realized how horrible they were treating him, and they came back the next day with brand new clothes for him. That got how many? I mean, this inspires people to be better. So yeah, you can use social media for good. I know it feels uncomfortable, but that's how you're going to change people. This is the day and age of social media. It just is. That's how we're going to reach people and get the world to be a better place.
We always believe in spreading goodness. And so to use our social media as a way to do that, to spread the goodness, it's so important. And like we said earlier, research continues to show that when you share goodness, it not only affects the person serving, the person receiving, but the bystanders seeing that. And when you put it on social media, the people witnessing your act of service becomes all of your friends and all of your family and followers that you have on whatever platform that you share it on. So please get involved with this. Use the hashtag Giving Tuesday Military. And if you want to support us too, you can use hashtag Extraordinary Acts for Others and share what it is that you're doing and how you're bringing people together and serving one another and just making our community's country even more extraordinary than they already are. So thank you, Jessica, for sharing this. Thank you, Jessica, Samantha, and Maria, for bringing this on to us. We love the idea. We hope that it ignites and that we reach that 1 million acts of kindness. Hope you guys all have a good week, and we will be back with a second episode for season 2 with Sugar Bear Foundation next week.